The night my mother threw me out, she didn't even look at me when she closed the door. I was standing on the front porch in my socks, holding a trash bag with my clothes, while my little sister watched from behind her like I was something embarrassing she wanted hidden. "You're not my problem anymore," my mom said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. And then she locked the door like she was sealing something shut for good. I was 12 years old, and that was the moment I stopped being her daughter. But that wasn't the worst part. 18 years later, a lawyer would walk into a room and say one sentence that made everything she ever did fall apart. Before I tell you how that happened, take a second to like and subscribe, but only if this story speaks to your heart, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are, because I still remember checking the time that night like it meant something. My name is Emily Carter, I'm 30 years old, and this is the night my family erased me, and the day everything finally came back to the surface. It didn't start with the door. It started long before that, in small moments I didn't understand at the time. I grew up in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. The kind of place where every lawn looked the same and every family pretended to be perfect. From the outside, we were no different. My mom worked at a dental office, my stepdad sold insurance, and my younger sister Lily was the kind of kid people called special in that soft, admiring voice. She had perfect grades, perfect hair, and a way of smiling that made adults instantly take her side. I was different. Not bad. Not trouble. Just not her. I remember one afternoon when I was 9, standing in the kitchen holding a permission slip for a school field trip. It was $35. I had been excited about it for weeks. My mom barely glanced at it before saying, "We can't afford extras right now." That same night, Lily came home talking about a dance class she wanted to join. It was $120 a month. My mom signed her up before dinner. I didn't say anything. I learned early that asking questions didn't change outcomes, just made things worse. "Why does she get that?" I asked once quietly, thinking maybe there was a reason I didn't see. My mom didn't even hesitate. "Because she deserves it." That was the answer. Simple. Final. I stopped asking after that. By the time I turned 11, I had figured out my role in the family. I was the one who stayed out of the way. The one who cleaned up after dinner without being asked. The one who didn't get picked up first, didn't get celebrated, didn't get defended. If something went wrong, it was easier for everyone if it was my fault. And slowly, without anyone ever saying it directly, I started to believe that it probably was. But there were moments that didn't fit. Small things that didn't make sense back then. Like how my mom would get nervous when certain topics came up. Or how she would shut down conversations if I asked about my biological father. "That part of your life is over," she'd say, her voice tight, like she was closing a door I wasn't allowed to open. I didn't push. I didn't know how. Then came the night everything broke. It was late October. Cold enough that your breath showed in the air, but not cold enough for snow. I remember the time because I had just finished my homework. 8:47 p.m. It's funny what your brain holds onto. I walked into the living room and immediately felt it. The tension. My mom was standing with her arms crossed. Lily was sitting on the couch crying. Not loud. Controlled. The kind of crying that makes people rush to comfort you. My stepdad stood behind her like a witness. "Emily," my mom said. And the way she said my name told me this wasn't a normal conversation. "We need to talk." I stood there, still holding my pencil. "What happened?" Lily sniffed and looked at me like she didn't know me. "My bracelet is missing," she said. It was a gold bracelet our aunt had given her. Expensive. Special. My mom's eyes locked onto mine. "And she says you took it." I blinked. "What?" "No. I didn't." It felt unreal. Like I had stepped into someone else's life. "Don't lie," my stepdad said, his voice low but sharp. "We've been patient with you, Emily, but this—" "I didn't take anything," I said again, louder this time because something in me needed to be heard. My mom shook her head slowly like she had already decided. "We've had problems before," she said. "Attitude. Disrespect. Now stealing." "I didn't steal it," I whispered, but even I could hear how small my voice sounded. Lily looked down, then back up, tears still in her eyes. "I saw her in my room," she said. That was it. That was all it took. No proof. No questions. Just her word. My mom exhaled like she had reached the end of her patience. "I can't do this anymore," she said. And just like that, everything shifted. I didn't understand what she meant at first. Not until she walked past me, went to my room and came back with a black trash bag. She started putting my clothes into it. Shirts, jeans, my jacket. Fast, efficient. Like she had done this in her head 100 times already. Mom, what are you doing? My voice cracked, but she didn't stop. You need to leave, she said. Calm. Too calm. Just for tonight, I said quickly. I'll find the bracelet, okay? I'll prove it. No, she cut in. Not for tonight. For good. The words didn't land all at once. They came in pieces. Leave. For good. I stood there frozen, while my entire life got reduced to whatever could fit in a bag. My stepdad opened the front door. Cold air rushed in. Let's go, he said. And just like that, I was no longer part of that house. But what I didn't know then, what I couldn't have known, was that this wasn't about a bracelet at all. And 18 years later, someone with a briefcase and a name I had never heard before was going to prove it. I remember standing on that sidewalk long after the porch light went off, like if I stayed still enough, someone might open the door and say it was all a mistake. But no one came back, and after a while, even the neighbors stopped looking through their windows, and I realized I was completely on my own. I did not have a phone, I did not have money, I did not even have shoes on, just thin socks already damp from the cold concrete. And for a moment I honestly did not know where to go. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was the silence, the kind that settles in when you understand that no one is coming to fix it. I started walking because standing still made it feel more real, and I kept telling myself this was temporary, that maybe in the morning my mom would calm down, that maybe she would call me, that maybe this was just one of those moments parents regret, but deep down something felt different, something final. I walked 3 blocks before I knocked on the first door I could think of, my friend Jenna's house, and when her mom opened the door, her expression shifted from confusion to concern in about 2 seconds. Emily, honey, what happened? She asked, and I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out at first, because I had not prepared for this. I had not prepared for explaining why my own mother did not want me anymore. I just held up the trash bag like that explained everything. She let me in without another question, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and called someone, and I remember sitting at their kitchen table staring at the clock on the microwave, watching the minutes pass like they meant something, like they could take me back if I stared hard enough. But no one called from my house. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not ever. That was the moment I understood this was not temporary. This was permanent. The next few weeks blurred together in a way that still feels strange when I think about it now. There were conversations I was not part of. Adults speaking in low voices, decisions being made about me while I sat in the next room pretending not to listen. Words like placement and situation and long-term floated through the walls, and every time I heard them, something in my chest tightened. Jenna's family let me stay for a while, but I could tell it was not meant to last, not because they did not care, but because there were rules, systems, things bigger than kindness that dictated what happened next. One afternoon, a woman I had never met sat across from me at the same kitchen table and introduced herself as a social worker, and that was the first time someone officially said it out loud. Your mother has decided not to take you back, she said carefully, like the words might break if she said them too fast. I nodded like I understood, like this was something normal, like this was just another step in a process I had chosen. But inside it felt like the ground had shifted again. Because even after that night, some part of me had still believed there would be a reversal, an apology, something that would make it make sense. But there was nothing. Just paperwork. Just signatures. Just decisions that did not include me. I was moved into foster care 2 weeks later. The house was not far from where I grew up, which somehow made it worse. Same streets. Same grocery stores. Same school district. But a completely different life. The first night there, I lay in a bed that did not belong to me, staring at a ceiling I had never seen before, listening to the quiet hum of a house that was not mine. And I remember thinking how strange it was that everything could change so quickly without the world even noticing. The next morning, I went to school like nothing had happened. Same building. Same lockers. Same hallways. But people looked at me differently, or maybe I just felt different, like everyone could see something on me that I could not wash off. I kept my head down. I did not talk about it. When teachers asked where I had been, I said I was sick. It was easier that way. Days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, and slowly I stopped expecting anything from the past. No calls. No letters. No explanations. My mom never reached out. Not once. Lily did not either. It was like I had been erased from their lives as easily as my clothes had been thrown into that bag. And eventually, I did something I did not realize I was doing at the time. I stopped asking why. Because asking why meant hoping for an answer. And hoping for an answer meant believing someone cared enough to give me one. So I built something else instead. Routine. Survival. I focused on school because it was predictable. Numbers made sense. Rules made sense. Effort had results. It was simple in a way my family had never been. I got a part-time job as soon as I was old enough, saving every dollar like it mattered, because now it did. I learned how to take care of myself in ways most kids do not have to think about. And on the outside it looked like I was adjusting. Like I was moving forward. Like I was fine. But there was always something underneath, something quiet and constant. A question I had buried so deep I almost forgot it was there. Why that night? Why that accusation? Why me? Because even after everything, one thing never sat right. It had been too fast. Too certain. Too easy for her to let me go. Like she had been waiting for a reason. And I did not know it yet, but that feeling, that small persistent doubt, was the first clue that the story I had been told was not the real one. I got good at being invisible because it made life easier, not better, just easier, and for a long time that was enough. I moved through foster homes like a guest who never unpacked, always polite, always careful, always aware that nothing was truly mine and nothing was guaranteed to stay. Some houses were quiet, some were loud, some treated me like a responsibility, others like a temporary inconvenience, but I learned to adapt quickly, to read people before they spoke, to understand what version of myself they expected and give them exactly that. I told myself this was strength, that I was resilient, that I was learning how to survive, but there was another truth underneath it that I did not want to face. I was learning how to be unwanted without making it obvious. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was how normal it started to feel. By the time I turned 15, I had stopped counting how many times I had moved, and I had stopped thinking about my old house like it belonged to me. It became something else in my mind, like a place I had seen in a movie once, familiar but distant, not quite real. I stopped wondering if my mom ever thought about me. I stopped imagining what Lily was doing. I stopped checking the phone for calls that were never going to come. And in that silence I built something new. I built control. School became the one place where the rules did not change depending on how someone felt about me. If I studied, I passed. If I worked harder, I did better. It was simple in a way my life had never been. I stayed after class, I asked questions, I volunteered for everything that gave me structure because structure meant safety. Teachers started to notice. Not in a dramatic way, not like I was suddenly exceptional, but enough that they knew my name, enough that they expected something from me. And for the first time in a long time, I did not feel like I was disappearing. I got my first real job at 16, working at a grocery store about 2 miles from my foster home, stocking shelves and bagging groceries, saving every dollar I could. I remember my first paycheck, holding it in my hands like it meant more than money, like it was proof that I could exist without anyone else deciding my worth. I opened a bank account the next week, my name on it, just mine, and that small detail mattered more than I could explain at the time. I was building something that could not be taken away as easily as a home or a family. But even as I moved forward, there were moments that pulled me back, small cracks in the version of the story I had accepted. It happened once during a routine appointment with a school counselor, the kind they make every foster kid attend whether you need it or not. She was flipping through my file, asking standard questions, when she paused for a second longer than usual. "Do you remember the incident that led to your placement?" she asked, her tone neutral but her eyes focused. I nodded. My sister said I took something. My mom believed her. That was the story. Clean. Simple. Final. She looked down at the paper again, then back at me. "And that was it?" she asked. I shrugged. That was enough. She did not say anything after that, but I noticed the way she hesitated before closing the folder, like there was something she was not saying. I did not push. I had learned not to, but that moment stayed with me longer than I expected, because it planted something small but persistent. Doubt. Not about what happened but about how it happened. It had been too immediate, too absolute. No investigation. No second chance. No hesitation. Just a decision that erased me overnight. And the more I thought about it, the less it made sense. Even for someone who had already decided I was not worth much, that kind of finality felt prepared. Like the conclusion had been decided before the accusation was even made. I tried to ignore it. I focused on graduating, on getting out, on creating a life that did not depend on answers I was never going to get. I applied to community college because it was affordable, because it was realistic, because I knew I had to build everything from the ground up without anyone else stepping in. I worked 2 jobs, one during the day and one at night, sleeping in between classes when I could, living in small apartments that barely felt permanent but were still mine in a way nothing else had been. I told myself I was doing fine. And for the most part I had stability. I had independence. I had a future that was mine to shape. But every now and then something would catch me off guard. A customer at work with the same last name as mine. A girl who looked like Lily from behind. A mother calling out to her daughter in a grocery store aisle with a tone I barely remembered, but somehow recognized instantly. And each time there was this brief, sharp moment where everything I had built felt thinner than I wanted it to be. Like there was still a part of my life unfinished. A question left hanging in the background. I never went looking for answers. I never tried to contact them. I never even searched their names online. Because if I did, it would mean I still cared enough to know. And I told myself I did not. But that was not entirely true. Because the question never really left. Just got quieter. It waited. And I did not know it yet, but 18 years later, it was going to be answered in a way I could never have imagined, by someone who had been holding the truth the entire time. By the time I turned 23, my life looked stable on the outside in a way that almost felt unreal when I compared it to where I had started. I had my own small apartment, a 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor of an older building just outside downtown, nothing fancy, about 600 square feet, but it was clean, quiet, and most importantly, it was mine. I worked full-time at a logistics company, handling scheduling and operations, a job that required attention to detail and consistency, 2 things I had spent years training myself to be good at. I paid my bills on time, I kept my routine, I built something that did not rely on anyone else. And for a while that felt like enough. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was how easy it became to pretend that the past no longer mattered, because pretending is not the same as healing, it is just quieter. There were nights when I would sit on my couch after work, the apartment completely silent except for the hum of the refrigerator, and I would catch myself staring at nothing, like my mind was reaching for something it could not quite grab. I told myself it was just stress, just exhaustion, just life, but deep down I knew it was something else, something unfinished. I had built a life without answers, but I had never replaced the questions. And then one Tuesday afternoon, everything shifted in a way I did not see coming. I was at work, halfway through my shift, staring at a spreadsheet on my screen, when my phone buzzed with a number I did not recognize. I almost ignored it. I usually did. Unknown numbers rarely meant anything good. But something made me pause just long enough to pick it up. "Hello," I said, already preparing to end the call quickly. There was a brief silence on the other end. Then a man's voice, calm, measured, professional. "Is this Emily Carter?" he asked. "Yes," I said, my tone cautious. "This is Thomas Caldwell. I am an attorney calling regarding a personal matter that concerns you." I felt my stomach tighten immediately. Not panic. Not yet. Just that familiar tension, like something important had just entered the room and I did not know what it was. "I think you have the wrong number," I said automatically, because that was easier than engaging with something I did not understand. "I do not believe I do," he replied, his voice steady. "This concerns your mother, Rebecca Carter." The name hit harder than I expected. I had not heard it spoken out loud in years. Not at work. Not by strangers. Not in a context that involved me. I did not respond right away. I could feel my grip tighten around the phone. "I do not have a relationship with her," I said finally, each word deliberate. "That is understood," he said. "However, there is information you need to hear. It would be best discussed in person." I let out a short breath, not quite a laugh. "I am not interested," I said, because that was the truth I had been living by for years. Not interested. Not involved. Not going back. There was a pause on the line, longer this time, like he was choosing his next words carefully. "Miss Carter," he said, his tone shifting slightly, still calm but firmer. This is not a request based on family reconciliation. This is a legal matter. And it directly affects you. That was different. That was not emotional. That was not personal. That was something else entirely. Something structured. Something real. I felt that small persistent question I had buried for years begin to surface again. What kind of legal matter? I asked. Another pause. One that has been delayed for 18 years, he said. And just like that, everything inside me went still. 18 years. The number was not random. It lined up too perfectly with the one moment in my life that had never been explained. I think it would be best if we spoke in person, he continued. I am available this week. I can meet you at my office, or any location you feel comfortable with. I looked around the office at the normalcy of everything around me, coworkers typing, phones ringing, conversations happening like nothing had changed, and for a second, it felt like I was standing outside of it all. Like I had stepped into a different timeline without warning. I will think about it, I said, because it was the only honest answer I had. That is all I ask, he replied. I will send you my contact information. When you are ready, reach out. The call ended a few seconds later, but the silence it left behind felt heavier than the conversation itself. I stared at my phone for a long time after that, reading the text message he sent with his name, his office address, his credentials. It was real, verified, professional, not a mistake, not a prank, not something I could easily dismiss. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I had not allowed myself to feel in years. Curiosity. Not emotional curiosity. Not the kind that comes from wanting closure. This was sharper. More focused. Like a piece of a puzzle I had stopped working on had suddenly reappeared on the table. I tried to go back to work. I really did. I stared at my screen, moved numbers around, answered emails, but nothing felt as solid as it had before that call. Everything felt slightly off, like the foundation had shifted just enough that I could not ignore it. Because there was one thing I could not get out of my head. He had not said anything about reconciliation. He had not asked me to forgive anyone. He had not mentioned family at all. He had said legal. He had said delayed. He had said 18 years. And I realized something in that moment that I had not fully admitted to myself before. Whatever happened that night when I was 12, it was not just emotional. It was not just a bad decision. It was something else. Something bigger. Something planned. And for the first time, I understood that the story I had been living with might not just be incomplete. It might have been wrong from the beginning. I did not call him back that day or the next or even the day after that because for 18 years I had built my life around not going backward, and this felt like the exact opposite of everything I had worked for. I told myself it did not matter, that whatever legal issue existed had nothing to do with me, that I had already survived without answers and I could keep doing that, but the truth was quieter and harder to ignore. I was thinking about it constantly. At work, at home. In the middle of the night when everything was silent, and there was nothing to distract me from the questions that had suddenly become louder than they had been in years. 18 years. That number kept repeating in my head like it meant something specific. Like it was not just a coincidence but a timeline. A delay. Something intentional. And that was not the worst part. The worst part was the realization that I had never actually chosen to let go of the past. I had just been forced to move forward without understanding it. And now, for the first time, there was a possibility that understanding existed somewhere, waiting, documented, structured, real. I lasted 3 days before I called him back. I was sitting at my kitchen table, the same place I paid my bills every month, the same place where everything in my life made sense, and I stared at the number on my phone for a long time before pressing call. When he answered, his voice was exactly the same as before, calm, steady, like he had been expecting it. "Miss Carter," he said, not surprised. "Thank you for returning my call." "I do not have a lot of time," I said, even though that was not true because I needed to feel like I still had control over something. "That is fine," he replied. "I believe this conversation is best had in person. Are you available tomorrow afternoon?" I hesitated for a second, not because of my schedule, but because saying yes meant stepping into something I could not undo. "Where?" I asked. He gave me an address downtown, a building I recognized but had never been inside. The kind of place with glass doors and polished floors, professional, distant. Nothing like the life I had come from. 3 o'clock, he said. Ask for me at reception. The call ended shortly after that, and for the rest of the evening, I moved through my apartment like everything was slightly out of place, like the familiar had become unfamiliar just enough to notice. I barely slept that night. Not because I was afraid, but because my mind would not stop running through possibilities, most of them incomplete, none of them fully formed. By the time the next afternoon came, I had already decided one thing. I was not going there for closure. I was not going there for family. I was going there for information. Nothing more. The building looked exactly like I expected it to, tall, modern, quiet in a way that felt intentional. I walked in at 2:55 p.m., 5 minutes early, because I have always preferred being early to being uncertain. The receptionist asked my name, made a quick call, and within a minute, a man in his late 50s walked out from a hallway to the right. Gray hair, neat suit, nothing exaggerated, just professional in a way that matched his voice. "Emily Carter," he said, offering a small nod instead of a handshake, like he understood this was not a normal meeting. "Thank you for coming." I nodded back, not trusting myself to say anything yet, and followed him down the hallway into a private office. It was simple, organized, a large desk, a few chairs, shelves lined with files, everything in its place. He gestured for me to sit, then closed the door behind us, the soft click echoing louder than it should have. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He sat across from me, not behind the desk, which felt intentional, like he was trying to make this feel less formal, less distant. It did not work. "I understand this is unexpected," he said finally. "That is one way to put it," I replied, keeping my tone even. He studied me for a second, not in a personal way, more like he was assessing how to proceed. Then he reached for a folder on the table beside him. It was thick, organized, labeled, real. "Before I explain," he said, "there is something I need to confirm. You were removed from your mother's home at age 12, correct?" I nodded once. "And you were not contacted by her or any immediate family members after that point?" "No," I said, the word coming out sharper than I intended. "Not once." He exhaled slowly, like that confirmed something important. "All right," he said. "Then I will begin at the point where the information diverges from what you were told." That sentence landed differently than anything else he had said so far. Diverges. Not contradicts. Not replaces. Diverges. Like there were two versions of the same story, and I had only been given one. He opened the folder carefully, not rushing, and turned it so it faced me. Inside were documents. Official. Legal. Dates. Signatures. Names I recognized and others I did not. My name was there. That alone was enough to make my chest tighten. "Emily," he said, his tone steady, "the reason I am here is because a legal agreement that was established 18 years ago has reached its activation point." Activation point. The words sounded clinical, detached, like this was a process that had been set in motion long before I had any awareness of it. "What agreement?" I asked, my voice quieter now, not weak, just focused. He met my eyes directly. No hesitation, no uncertainty. "An agreement concerning your guardianship, your removal from your mother's home, and the allocation of certain assets tied to your name." I felt the room shift again, not physically, but in the way everything I thought I understood started to loosen. Guardianship. Allocation. Assets. These were not words that belonged to the story I had been told. "I do not understand," I said, and for the first time since I walked in, that was completely true. He nodded slightly, like he expected that. "You were not meant to," he said. "Not until now." And in that moment I realized something that made everything else feel smaller. This was not just about what happened to me. This was about something that had been planned, documented, and hidden, something that had been waiting for exactly this moment to be revealed. And whatever it was going to change everything I thought I knew about the night I lost my family. My first instinct was to pull my hand back from the folder, like if I did not touch it, none of this would become real, but I forced myself to stay still because walking away now would mean choosing not to know, and I had already lived 18 years like that. "Start from the beginning," I said, my voice steady even though everything inside me felt like it was shifting. He nodded once, like he respected that, then turned the first page fully toward me. It was a legal document, dated the same week I was thrown out, My name printed clearly at the top, followed by terms I did not fully understand yet but recognized as serious, binding, intentional. This, he said, tapping lightly on the page, is a trust agreement established in your name when you were 12 years old. I blinked, not because I did not hear him, but because the sentence did not connect to anything I knew about my life. I did not have anything to put in a trust, I said automatically. I was a kid. Correct, he replied calmly. You did not create it. It was created for you. That was not the worst part. The worst part was what came next. By your maternal grandfather. The name hit in a way I was not prepared for because I had not thought about him in years, not since before everything happened, not since he stopped being mentioned at all. My grandfather? I asked slower now, trying to keep up. Yes, he said. He established a financial trust in your name shortly before his passing. The assets were significant, and the conditions were very specific. I stared at the paper, at the lines of text that suddenly felt heavier than they should have. What kind of conditions? I asked. He did not answer right away. Instead, he turned another page, this one marked with tabs, annotations, signatures. The primary condition, he said carefully, was that the funds would remain inaccessible until you reached the age of 30. 30. My age now. That alone made my chest tighten, but it was not enough to explain anything yet. That still does not explain why I was thrown out, I said, the words coming out sharper this time. No, it does not, he agreed. Which is why there is more. He flipped to another section, one that looked different from the rest, more detailed, more deliberate. Your grandfather included a protective clause, he continued. A clause designed to prevent any interference with the trust from external parties, including your legal guardians at the time. External parties. Legal guardians. My mother. The connection started forming before he even said it out loud. What kind? I was ready for the answer. He paused for a moment, not because he did not know, but because he understood the weight of what he was about to say. According to the documentation, he began, there were multiple attempts made to establish financial control through indirect means, including requests for early access under guardianship authority. I let out a small breath, not quite a laugh, not quite anything else. And that did not work, I said. No, he replied. It did not. Silence filled the space between us for a few seconds, but it was not empty. It was building. Because there was still one question that had not been answered. The most important one. So she got rid of me, I said finally, the words landing heavier than anything else we had said so far. He did not respond immediately. That was answer enough. Emily, he said after a moment, his tone still calm but softer now. The timing of your removal from the household aligns directly with the final denial of access to the trust under her guardianship. Aligns. Not confirms. Not accuses. Just aligns. But it was enough. More than enough. Because suddenly that night was not random anymore. It was not about a bracelet. It was not about a mistake or a misunderstanding. It was a decision. A calculated one. And for the first time in my life, the pieces did not dehet thoi John Chogue Tin Nan. Vui Long Thursday Lai. I did not touch the documents right away because something about them felt heavier than paper, like once I started reading, there would be no way to go back to the version of my life that made sense. I just stared at my name printed there in clean official letters, and for a second, I felt like I was looking at someone else's story, not mine. You can take your time, Mr. Caldwell said quietly, watching me but not pushing, and I appreciated that more than I expected. Structured. Something planned. I started reading, and the words did not come all at once. They came in pieces. Legal terms. Names. Dates. Signatures. And then one line that made everything else fade out. Primary beneficiary, Emily Carter. I blinked once, then again, like my eyes had made a mistake. What is this? I asked, my voice quieter than before, not weak, just focused in a way I had never felt before. Mr. Caldwell folded his hands slightly, like he had been waiting for that exact moment. It is a trust, he said. Established in your name when you were a minor. A trust. The word sounded distant, like something that belonged to other people, not to someone who had spent years counting every dollar just to stay stable. By who? I asked. There was a small pause. Not hesitation. Precision. Your biological father, he said. And just like that, the ground shifted again. My biological father. A name I had not been allowed to explore. A person my mother had shut down every time I asked. That is not possible, I said automatically, because that was the only response my brain could produce. I was told. You were told very little, he interrupted gently, not dismissing me, just correcting the path I had been given. And that was intentional. I looked back down at the paper, my heart beating faster now, not in panic but in something sharper. Clarity trying to form. He created this trust when you were 12, Mr. Caldwell continued. It was structured to activate when you turned 30, provided certain conditions were met. 30, land all at once. They unfolded slowly, like my mind was trying to protect me from understanding them too quickly. What do you mean? I asked, my voice steady, even though something inside me had already started to crack. He turned a page in the folder, sliding another document toward me. There was a clause, he said. A very specific one. If you remained in your mother's household past the age of 12, she would have gained partial control over the assets held in your name. I stared at the paper, but I was no longer reading. I was listening. Every word mattered now. And if I did not? I asked. Then she would have no legal access to any of it, he said simply. The room went quiet. Not physically. Everything around us was still the same. But inside my head, everything had stopped. Because there was only one direction this could go. Only one explanation that fit all of this. Are you saying? I started, but the sentence did not finish. I did not need to finish it. He understood. I am saying, he replied carefully, that your removal from the home occurred within 48 hours of the trust being finalized. 48 hours. I felt that number hit harder than anything else. Because it meant this was not a reaction. It was not a decision made in anger. It was not about a bracelet. It was not about a lie. It was timing. It was strategy. It was choice. She knew, I said, not as a question, but as a realization that had already formed. Mr. Caldwell did not confirm it directly, but he did not deny it either. She was informed of the trust's existence, he said. Yes. I looked down at my hands for a second, steady still, not shaking, which surprised me. I had imagined that if I ever learned the truth about that night, I would feel something explosive. Anger. Pain. Something loud. But what I felt instead was something else. Something colder. So she got rid of me, I said quietly. To protect the money. There was a pause. Then a single word. Yes. And that was the moment everything changed, not in a dramatic way, not in a loud way, but in a quiet, irreversible shift where the story I had carried for 18 years stopped being real and something else, something far more calculated and far more deliberate, took its place. Because I had spent my entire life believing I was thrown away because I was not enough. But the truth was, I had been removed because I was worth too much. For a long time I did not say anything after that, because there are moments when words feel too small for what you are realizing, and this was one of them. I just sat there looking at the documents, replaying everything I thought I knew, and watching it fall apart piece by piece. I was not thrown out because I was a problem. I was not abandoned because I was difficult. I was removed because I was in the way. That was the truth. Simple. Clean. Calculated. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was how easily it all fit together once I knew. The speed of that night. The certainty in her voice. The way she did not hesitate. The way no one questioned it. It was never about finding out what happened. It was about making sure I was gone before anything else could happen. I let out a slow breath, steady, controlled, because that was the only way I knew how to handle something this big. How much? I asked, my voice calm, almost detached, because the number did not matter emotionally, but it mattered in understanding the scale of what had been done. Mr. Caldwell did not answer right away. He reached into the folder again and pulled out another document, sliding it toward me carefully. The trust has grown over the last 18 years, he said. Initial assets were significant. Investments have performed well. I looked down at the number. I did not react immediately. Not because it was small, because it was the opposite. It was more than I had ever imagined being connected to my name. More than any decision I had made in my adult life. More than the sum of everything I had built on my own. And in that moment I understood something that hit harder than the number itself. This was what she had chosen over me. Not just money. Control. Access. Power. Does she know? I asked. That it activated? She was notified, he said. As part of the original agreement, all relevant parties were to be informed once the conditions were met. I nodded slowly, processing that. And she contacted you? I asked. She attempted to, he replied. However, she has no legal standing in this matter. The assets belong solely to you. I leaned back slightly, the weight of that settling in. Solely to me. Not shared. Not controlled. Not influenced. Mine. The word felt unfamiliar. Not uncomfortable. Just new. What happens now? I asked. He folded his hands again, calm, precise. That depends on you, he said. The trust is now fully accessible. You may choose to manage it, restructure it, or leave it as is. Additionally, there are legal options available regarding the circumstances of your removal, should you choose to pursue them. Legal options. The phrase lingered for a second, not as a suggestion but as a door. One I could open or leave closed. I did not respond to that right away, because my mind was somewhere else. Not in the office. Not in the present. But back on that porch. 12 years old. Holding a trash bag. Listening to a door close. And now, for the first time, I understood that moment in a completely different way. It was not the end of something. It was the execution of a plan. I looked back at the documents, then up at Mr. Caldwell. There is something else, I said, because there was one question that had not gone away, one piece that still did not fully connect. My biological father, I continued. Where is he in all of this? Mr. Caldwell's expression shifted slightly, not dramatically, just enough to signal that this part mattered. He passed away shortly after establishing the trust, he said. But before his death, he made very specific arrangements to ensure the assets would be protected until you reached adulthood. I nodded once, absorbing that. A person I had never known had done something that shaped my entire life without me realizing it. Did he know what would happen? I asked. This time Mr. Caldwell did pause. He anticipated resistance, he said carefully, which is why the conditions were structured the way they were. Resistance. That word said more than anything else. It meant this was not an accident. It was expected, planned for, accounted for. I sat there for a moment longer, letting everything settle into place, not rushing it, not reacting too quickly, because I had learned that the first reaction is not always the right one. And then I realized something that changed the direction of everything again. If she knew about the trust, I said slowly, then she has known this entire time. Yes, he said. She has. I nodded, a small, controlled movement, but inside something shifted again. Not breaking this time, but aligning. Because this was no longer just about what happened to me. It was about what she had done after. 18 years. No contact. No explanation. No attempt to reach out. Not even when the trust activated. Not even when she knew I would find out the truth. That was a choice too. And choices matter. I closed the folder gently, not because I was finished, but because I had enough for now. Enough to understand. Enough to decide what came next. I want copies of everything, I said, my voice steady, clear. Of course, he replied. I did not rush to spend anything. I did not call anyone. I did not make announcements. I sat at my kitchen table, the same place where I had counted every dollar for years, and I realized something simple but powerful. I was no longer surviving. I was choosing. And that was something I had never had before. In the weeks that followed, I made careful decisions. I met with advisors. I asked questions not because I wanted more, but because I wanted to understand what had been taken from me and what had been protected from me at the same time. I moved to a slightly larger place, still modest, still mine, but with more light, more space, more room to breathe. I kept my job for a while, not because I needed to, but because it reminded me of who I was before all of this, and I did not want to lose that version of myself. The one who built something from nothing. The one who kept going without answers. And then, one afternoon about 3 weeks after everything came to light, my phone rang again. This time, I knew the number before I even looked at it. I let it ring once. Twice. 3 times. I did not feel panic. I did not feel anger. I just felt clear. When I answered, there was a pause on the other end, like she did not expect me to pick up. Emily, my mother said, her voice, a boundary. Just a decision. Just a quiet kind of closure that did not come from her, but from me. Because the truth is, not every story ends with reconciliation. Some stories end with clarity, some end with distance, and sometimes that is what healing actually looks like. It is not about going back. It is about finally understanding that you do not have to. If you are listening to this and you have ever felt like you were not enough for the people who were supposed to love you, I want you to hear this clearly. Their inability to see your value does not define your worth.